Hello, Adam.
Hi, Igor. How are you?
I'm doing great. I want to jump right in with the first question. So you mentioned that you studied in the US and it changed your perspective on things, especially on importance of helping others, on life. So could you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about studying the States was the culture shock, and not the culture shock from regarding how different it is from the UK, but the culture shock regarding how different it was from my expectations of what it would be. So this is back in the sort of the mid '90s, and I sort of understood that the American dream meant that you could achieve whatever you wanted to, but if you had to step on someone else to do it, then so be it. Couldn't be further from the truth. It was very much a case of we can all achieve amazing things if we help each other, and so that really for me was gorgeous because that's how I've lived my life and what my belief system is anyway. So to be in this environment, especially coming from Imperial, where it's very competitive, and going to a university of equal stature in the States, I was expecting that level of competition, but it wasn't. Everyone helped each other out, whether it was in your prep work, your homework, or in group work. And then when I worked for 3M in Minneapolis in the summer after my year at university in Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and again, having worked in a number of engineering institutions, especially ones that are sort of government led, people had a very blinkered view and a regimented view of their role, and didn't really think outside the box. Whereas in the States, everyone thought outside the box. There were no gaps. So people were happy to collaborate rather than going, "Oh no, that's not my job. You do it." They were happy to expand their sort of not criteria, the sort of area of operations to make sure there were no gaps through which things could fall. So things worked a lot better. There was a tremendous degree of ownership. People were happy to have ownership rather than avoiding it. And that's, I think, all played into my attitude towards management and my attitude towards mentoring and my attitude towards tutoring and teaching going forwards.
Well, I wanted to follow up on this. Perhaps if you can think of an example of a helpful American who helped you as a mentor or just helpful in other ways during your study abroad experience that inspired you or shaped your approach to mentoring others?
Well, I think the first thing to say is all Americans are helpful that I met. So to pick one out would be difficult. I think one of the most inspiring ones was a lecturer that I had called Lake Marabo. And the reason he was inspiring was he was really understated, but a very engaging lecturer. In fact, I think he lectured us on organizational behavior, but was, a fantastic engineer and designer in his own right. And I remember walking around the workshops with him, and he was showing us around. And first of all, I was blown away by the quality of the workshops compared to Imperials at the time. And obviously now Imperial's got amazing workshops now, but I might add. But anyway, as we were walking around, I sort of pointed to something and said, "Oh, to Lake, oh, what is that?" And he said, "Oh, it's my spaceship." And I was like, "What?" And he goes, "Well, I figure that I'm too old to go into space unless I build my own spaceship." And I thought, he was just being a mad professor. Turns out that not only did he invent the re-entry system for the shuttle, but when I got about a year after I got back from the States, I was watching the Discovery Channel, and there was a footage of it looked like the sky and a little pointer, and then this strange little sound like a, and then this object appeared and it looked like a small version of Lake's spaceship. And I was like, "Oh my God, that's Lake's spaceship!" And I remembered that he basically told me about the physics of getting out, out of the Earth's orbit. And if you can, I forgot what the scale is, but let's say it's a 1 in 10 scale. If you can get a 1 in 10 scale model to get to something like 500 feet, then all the physics scales up, so you should be able to get it to escape the atmosphere. And so this was his test. of his is like a microwave powered spacecraft that basically had a concave lens at the bottom. You find microwaves in it, and it exploded. It basically exploded the air underneath it, so you got like a pulse jet going up. And he was actually testing it out in the desert.
Wow,
He was
that's
very inspirational to me.
that's a very cool example. Now I wanted to come back to your current role. So you were the head of mentoring at British Design Fund, where
Yep.
your main goals are expanding the mentorship. So what are you planning to do in the next 6 months to accomplish those goals?
It's going to be definitely going to be a challenge. I think that the reason being is that with and we are entirely sort of physical design focused, and within that there's a tremendously broad remit. Everything from um, microgravity testing missiles and drones to soft prosthetics for children, right? So that's very broad. And as a result, we need, with mentors, I need a combination of general mentors that are able to mentor across all aspects of almost any physical business, and specialist mentors to look at things like, the to market strategy, supply chain strategy, product development strategy, HR strategy, and that sort of things. Now, the sort of the more focused mentorship is straightforward. I think my challenge is going to be is finding those individuals with a broad base of knowledge and experience that also have the time that I can deploy across the entire cohort. Because at the moment I mentor all the majority of the cohort, sort of 90% of them, on everything, and then pull in specialist mentors as and when. And so I need to grow. Obviously, I need to clone myself or find a version of me, because we're about to expand into Scotland with the Scottish Design Fund. And then, of course, every year we have, at least once a year, we have a new BDF fund. So we get new people into new cohorts into the BDF family. And so with the Scottish Design Fund, that's going to substantially increase my workload, which is fine. But I think that it's a good time to now start, casting the net and finding potential mentors to support me. How I'm going to do that is through the obvious route initially is through my own contacts. So not only the people I know being mentors, but reaching out to see if there's any people that they can suggest to be mentors. And then we've got the tricky challenge of actually working out whether they're any good or not, because that's a key component is you want to make sure you've got people that you can trust. The last thing I ever want to do is micromanage anyone, and certainly that's not going to work with mentoring. And so of course you need to have that confidence that their experience, their aptitude, their empathy, their ability to actively listen, their creativity and their problem solving are all in a nice package that you can sit back and just let go.
What actually blew my mind with mentorship is the team mentorship approach. When you have several mentors working with the same founder, and this is the idea that MIT Venture Mentoring Service promotes, and I was using it. And what I've seen it do, the best mentor is the kind of that super sharp, super experienced person who went through the journey that the founder is going through. That's the ideal mentor, but they rarely have time or commitment or willingness, or they're not a match for this particular person. I found team mentors to be the second best thing. When you have like 3 people, they're not perfect, but together they complement each other. There's flexibility in changing the teams. I wanted to ask, what's your thinking about this team mentorship model versus mentorship?
I love it. I mean, that's what we do at the Imperial Venture Mentoring Service. So I'm an Imperial mentor. You have 2 or 3 mentors assigned to each company, and ideally those two mentors are in the meeting at the same time. And I absolutely love it because, you know, I don't know everything, surprise, surprise. And also I'll have, you know, my experiences and my views will be different from someone else's. And so when you've got those two mentors with two different experiences and thoughts, you get, it sort of turbocharges the mentorship in a way, because you know, you often find them, the two having little sort of discussion between them, and it's all like clicks and whistles, and it eventually evolves into a consensus, and they go, right, we think you should do this. And it's a super way of accelerating that the development of the startups, but also sort of turbocharging, as I said, the mentorship itself. I think it's fantastic. I mean, there are opportunities for both. I think certainly as a sole mentor, you can have much more personal relationship with your mentees, so they can talk. Because for me, it's not just about the business. In fact, it's more about the people. And so, you know, if they've got things that aren't necessarily work specific, some issues that are not necessarily work specific, if you're mentoring on an individual basis, they can share those with you, and so you can get to understand the person a bit better, and therefore understand how they might act or react in certain situations, or what their stresses are, so why they are acting in a certain way, why they may be finding it difficult to make certain decisions, or reluctant to go down a certain route. So I think a combination of the two is good.
What I found in my experience, and my background is in consulting, is that if there are some specific time-sensitive problems that the founder needs to address, like one-on-one consulting with the right person is more effective. But in terms of providing like emotional support, foundation, network, and overall like longer-term commitment to the founder, having a team works best. Have you kind of seen, and would you agree with this, or do you think there is a different level of comparison here?
I think both can work in both ways. I mean, I've brought in, for really time critical stuff, I've brought in other mentors to work with me and the mentees at the same time, because there's so much to go through, you know, and so you need that viewpoint to make sure you haven't dropped anything or missed anything in the timeline, thinking of like go-to-market strategies or whatever. But equally, you know, when the stuff hits the fan, you know, I'm very capable of being quite strong in terms of what needs to be done in order for them to achieve what they want to achieve. So I think it really depends on the issue that's being faced and who it is you're mentoring, I think.
Actually, for my company, Kepler, we selected to essentially form an advisory board, but it's not one person. It's like a team of people, but we also work with one person who is helping us. Talking more about mentorship, it looks like there are a lot of organizations that the fund invested in. Could you share one success story where you specifically were involved as a mentor?
Well, I get probably one of the few that I can actually talk about would be Pequel. So Pequel is female urinals for festivals. Two female founders, Amber and Hazel, straight out of university, were frustrated with the fact that, you know, us men are lucky enough to be able to get our urinals, and all the women have got to queue for the cubicles, and they are massive queues. So they're like, right, how can we democratize this and make it fairer and have a female safe environment and a female urinal? So came up with these female urinals. Now, you know, they're big pieces of kit. You know, they're rotational molded. They require a lot of transportation and deployment, and so there's, you know, quite a lot of challenges with that. And I think the key way I sort of help them in the early stages was helping them, and as I do often with a lot of startups, is helping them take that step back and go, look, it's okay when things go wrong. But also, so one thing went wrong with with the production of the walls, And so I literally just came up with a solution for them. And they were like, "Oh my God, how did you think of that?" And I said, "Well, it's not my first rodeo. And also, I've got a very sort of, when stuff does go wrong and you are time critical, you just get it done. You just come up with something and get it done, and there can be, with anyone with a design background, there can often be too much navel gazing in consideration of which direction to go in. And you've got to sometimes go, look, let's just choose a direction, go there quickly, find out if it works or not. If it does, brilliant. Stick with it for now. And if it doesn't, you've failed quickly enough that you can come back and choose one of the other routes. So that sort of giving confidence, giving a solution, and giving confidence that what they're experiencing was normal, and that they are not alone in having to solve it. And I think that's the other thing with entrepreneurs is quite often they go, "Oh, it's my responsibility to solve this problem." That's not the case. It's your responsibility to find a solution through whatever mechanism you can. It doesn't mean that you personally have to solve it. Is reach out to people and solve it. And I think that's really important with all the mentoring that I do, is that to make people aware that they aren't alone. They're part of in either the British Design Fund or Imperial or Falmouth, and that there is therefore a community that can support them either through myself or through my networks, or through the networks that are embedded within the various institutions that are supporting them.
A very cool example. Love the story and love how you highlighted the role the mentor played, and your point about entrepreneurs not having to solve every problem. To me, this is the definition of entrepreneurship: using resources of other people, including intellectual capital. So thank you so much for sharing. I wanted to talk a little bit about your roles, because you seem to be doing so much. You have roles in academia, the British Design Fund. You mentioned VMS, Venture Mentoring Program. Like, how do you balance all those roles?
By being very hot on filling my diary with different colors. That's literally it. So, I mean, British Design Fund, I only work for them a few days a month, and so I've structured that very specifically. So the first Friday and the first the first Friday and the first Tuesday of every month are set out for mentoring. So I have the entire day from sort of 9 in the morning until 6, 7 at night is filled back to back, sometimes without a lunch, with hour-long or 45-minute, ideally, but it's usually an hour, meetings. And then I have set periods during the week when I answer emails, etc. And then the same with Imperial. That's only really probably half a day to a day a month. And then with Falmouth, that's a bit more involved. So there's sort of 2 to 3 days a week, because basically I've evolved into being actively involved in one of the startups spinning out. So I'm now CPO, CXO, and CSO of one of those startups, and we're just about to launch. So that's pretty full on, but thankfully very well supported by Falmouth in terms of my time.
Very cool. So you're not only like a mentor or coach, you're also a player.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta get your hands dirty, and I love that. I love that.
I loved it too, and I'm kind of in a similar space. So I have so many things like Traction 5, Kepler, coaching engagements, doing this podcast. What advice would you give to people who have multiple roles or interests in their careers, and how can we strike a balance between those various commitments?
I'm probably the worst person to ask, because I find it very hard to say no. And if there's something interesting or someone's got a need, so if someone's in need and they ask me to help them, then I find it very difficult to say no. So as a result, I think one of the things I don't have enough of is long-term planning. I'm in terms of my own success and what I ultimately want to achieve. So I think, therefore, the piece of advice that I would give anyone that's mentoring is consider what it is you want to achieve out of the mentorship and how you want that to evolve, and plan that first. So put the big things in first, the strategy in for achieving your 3 or 5 or 3 or 5 year aims, and then fit everything around that. Because that's not what I do.
Thank you for sharing your insights in different colors and giving hope that those things can be successfully combined. So we talked about successes. I wanted to ask about challenges. So what challenges have you faced in your own career journey that have informed your approach to mentorship?
Well, the easy answer to that is just having really bad mentors or no mentors, and really bad bosses, and all of that, and then observing bad leadership, just because it's so damaging and so obviously damaging. So for me personally, it's been in my early career, it's exceptionally damaging. You realize what the wrong way of doing things is, so the opposite is presumably the right way, and so you do that. You do the opposite, and in doing that very early on, I remember when I was in my first sort of management role, getting it right with my subordinates elicited such a strong response in them of gratefulness and productivity that confirmed to me that the way that I do things is the right way of doing things.
Can you talk about how overcoming those challenges shaped your ability to empathize with others? You talked a little bit like you build a different relationship with your direct reports. Could you expand on that? What exactly did you take and how you applied it?
I think well, the key thing is that you've got to in the UK we do, although it's changing, we do have this sort of fear of failure, and because I've failed quite a few times, and then come out of it the other side absolutely fine. I fully appreciate what it feels like to be in a situation which is very stressful, where you think everything is going wrong. You don't see, there isn't a light at the end of the tunnel that you can see, or indeed a direction to get to the end of the tunnel. And so that gives you having been through that a few times, it gives you the confidence to know, well, there is a way, and people aren't going to die. It's fine. It's a bit stressful at the moment, and therefore, but also you know what the person that you're mentoring is going through, so you can relate to them and go and give them confidence that you're not just saying this, and explain to them, the time that you've been there and what you did to overcome it, and also give them the confidence that because you've been through it, that you're a safe pair of hands to be able to guide them through it.
So one of the challenges that I hear and I heard on my previous podcasts from my guests is the challenge that mentors have when they have a founder in the room. They have a great conversation. There is empathy, notes are taken, insights are shared, everyone is in alignment. But then the next month, nothing happens. In 2 months, nothing happens. So there is no progress. Have you come across such situations?
Yes.
How would you recommend we address it, or what have you found effective in addressing that?
Yeah. So it's almost, this is a really geeky example, but when you're there's an international standard for sampling products.
Okay.
So with Orbel, we've produced a few million of those, and initially you'd sample, 1 in 100, then it was 1 in 1,000, then it's 1 in 10,000, then it's 1 in 1,000,000 or whatever. And then every time it fails at a level, you bring it down a level, so you're getting your sampling rate increases. Mentorship is essentially, well, part of mentorship is like that, is that if your touch points are failing, so you set goals and everyone's like, yeah, got it, and then a month later it's not been achieved, then meet every 2 weeks. And then if that's not happening, meet every week. And if that's not happening, then maybe you need a daily 15-minute, right, what we're going to do today.
I love this idea a lot.
You start with the belief that the person that you're talking to is happy and confident, capable of doing what they want to do. And if they aren't, then you've got to just increase that touch point and increase that opportunity to guide and to support. And it's just really about increasing that until they get to a point where you're almost training them. Then you're going, right, okay, I assume this. I've got to bring that assumption, that degree of assumption down. Okay, right, now we're training. So we're going to build your confidence up so you can do it by yourself. You can do it by yourself. You do it by yourself. So you sort of, nudging the ship, I suppose, would be the analogy.
I always look for such practical insights that people can implement right away. What you're talking about is like something very practical, very tangible. 2 years ago, I went to a conference which was called Global Consortium of Entrepreneurship Centers. And this is a group of directors of entrepreneurship centers across the world. They're not just local, but it was right after COVID, so most of them were from the US. And I was blown away by those people because technically they were in the academia, but they had so much freedom, so much money, and they did crazy things. And they were sharing, like in 2011, we were teaching college students how to write business plans. This year, we launched a student venture fund, and our students are investing in startups. I was blown away, but also a little bit kind of got concerned that it doesn't affect everyone. It doesn't affect every ecosystem. And there are a lot of places in the academia where this innovation has not caught up. What are you seeing in terms of UK market specifically? How deep are those VC academic relationships go? Where do you see opportunities for improvement?
That's a good question. I think the answer is potentially not as deep as it should be, and it's not really the VC role. I think there's an opportunity across almost every type of degree, whether that's the arts, engineering, design, whatever it is, to involve the relevant industry sooner. And certainly when I was co-director of the design program at Queen Mary University London and a senior lecturer in engineering and design there, I was very keen to get industry involved early on. So I would get, friends and colleagues to come in and lecture my engineering students. I think I even got, I don't think it might have been the first years, but the second year engineers, got a friend of mine who's like an expert in marketing to come down and talk about branding, which blew their minds because it's a classroom or a lecture theatre of 300 engineers suddenly being told about the intricacies of marketing. I think that, so the reason I'm saying that is that exposure to the outside world and what the opportunities might be for you, as I said, irrespective of the degree, is really important. Number two is also exposure to how things work in the outside world, outside of academia. So getting in, if you can get in, for industry sponsors of projects. So the DICE program, which is run by Professor Nabuki at Queen Mary, has every year people like Dupuy that come in and set a challenge for the students to answer. And so Dupuy is the second largest, world's second largest designer and manufacturer of hip and knee replacements. And so they have they've over the years challenged the students with a whole range of challenges. And that's really good. I think, so that's the first thing I would say, is we need more relationships with industry. The VC funding side, I think you are absolutely seeing universities now going or embracing that and going, right, actually we need to support our ventures. It's happening a lot slower than I would expect it to be. I mean, there's some very good examples of it. So for instance, Innovation RCA, which is the Royal College of Arts incubator, is stupendously successful. But that's a postgraduate. The Royal College of Art is a postgraduate university exclusively. So you've got people that have got that maturity. The undergrad universities tend to have, the PhD researchers and the PhDs working on research, and that's where the slowest sort of uptake in terms of spinning out is. And it's a shame when you've got some universities doing exceptionally well, like Oxford and Cambridge, and the set squared cohort, and others that are doing really poorly, but to a degree of not doing it at all, almost. And I think that's where the greatest opportunity in the academia or academic sector is benchmarking the ones that are doing it really well and getting everyone up to that level. So that, and that's evolving, we all the time. But that's where I think that the greatest gains can be made and should be made. And also, it's a fantastic opportunity for the universities, because not only do they put life into the research that the researchers are doing, but they get, it is a potential revenue stream. It is a potential employer and inspirer of students, of undergrads. It is a potential inspirer the incoming cohorts. Far better than a prospectus is, hitting the national news that a company has floated for, become a unicorn and floated for like 2 billion, right? I mean, if a university does that, they're going to get a lot of applications, right? So it's a win. It's an all-round win. So that's where I think the opportunity and the focus should be.
So you mentioned like benchmarking and finding those who do it really well. Could you highlight a few organizations or universities that are better than others?
Well, I think, I'm not going to say it's bad, but because that would be unfair. But obviously, I've said the Royal College of Art, Innovation RCA, fantastic. The Spec Squared cohort of universities in the southwest of England do it superbly well. I think they've got something like 300 startups.
Wow.
Across the board. So, from students and academics. Obviously, Oxford and Cambridge are well regarded. Imperial is especially with, the Imperial Venture Mentoring Service, a bit of a mouthful. There's some fantastic startups there. I mean, even when I was Imperial were pretty good at supporting academic rather than student startups, but now it's just amazing is what Imperial are doing. So there's a lot, and then obviously you've got the States, so MIT being a very good case in point. There's a lot of well-regarded, very vocal, easy to access institutions that are happy to share, who give away their thoughts and structures for free, to copy and to use for the greater good. So there's really no excuse for any institution, any academic institution, not to embrace it.
Thank you for giving those specific examples. So we talked a little bit about mentorship at individual level. I wanted to ask about mentorship at scale. And this is the topic I'm passionate about. I know you've used like tools, you mentioned Venture Tracker, so there is technology to play. I'm working on Traction 5. But what do you think it takes to offer mentorship at scale?
Oh, that's a very good question. A lot is the answer. So it's very much like the point of inflection from a startup to a scale up to a large company. You've got natural points of inflection. Say 20 people, about 40 or 50 people, about 120 people. You get these points of inflection where the natural and assumed dynamics of groups start to fail. So like the water cooler moments, you can no longer rely on water cooler moments to naturally proliferate information or whatever. So you've got to have more structured forms of communication, then you've got to have more structured forms of process. And that's exactly the challenge at mentoring at scale, is that you've got to then start having more rigid processes, because you now have many mentors working with you or you're overseeing. And therefore you have many companies. And so you've got to, because you can't have sight and sound you can't be in every meeting. You've got to have a way of not only tracking those meetings, but also monitoring the relationships, and even to a point of before the relationships of seeding the relationships, so understanding who would work with whom. So is the chemistry right? Is the knowledge and experience versus the needs right? That needs to be formalized. See, all these things that you just take for granted because you'd have a beer with someone or you'd go out with them or you'd know them, you have to put structure in place to ensure that you have that time to spend with them, to understand who they are, what they need, etc. So, and that's the same with the growing company. You start to have more structures in place for communications, for process, for managing issues, for highlighting issues, for tracking success, all of that. So it's more admin, I suppose, is the answer to how do you mentor at scale by the development of administration processes and practices.
That's what I'm trying to do, and I'm learning that my dream was to build kind of best practice, especially like on this VMS model. But the challenge, there are things that are not necessarily best practice, but some organization is just in love with this process. And you have to balance this customization, which is not necessarily best practice. It might not elsewhere, but it works for this particular team, and some other team has something else. And when I enforce my structure, create certain dissatisfaction. But if I try and implement for every small organization, every little tweak, I will not be able to build a good product. And I think it's similar with design, right? Do you have any advice for me and for folks who are doing something in that space?
That's a really interesting one. Do you know the concept of affordances?
Nope.
Okay, so the more specific you make a tool, the less affordances it has. So, for instance, a stick, one would argue a stick is more useful than a hammer, because with a stick you can do many things. You can prop stuff up, you can carry things, you can do this, you can do that, whatever. You can maybe sit on it. Hammer, you can pretty much only hammer with. So I think with any tool, the less specific you make it, the more flexible you make it. Therefore, the more adaptive it can be to any situation. It's a case of thinking about the benefits of what you're doing versus features. You never don't features can often belie benefit. So focus on benefit before you develop any features, and any feature you do develop, well, what is the benefit of this, and then what is it going to remove affordances? Is does it by putting this feature in place, does it remove the usefulness of anything? Because not all features add benefit, and not all features improve the usefulness of things. So I keep it. The simplest tools are the best tools. Go for a stick, not a hammer, or go for a stick, not a Swiss Army knife.
What I'm trying to do, though, is to build a hammer for mentorship. So just something that is more effective than a stick.
I mean, the other analogy I really like is the fact that you should lay the grass before you lay the path. So you see where people walk. So if you can create a tool that people can build themselves, and you see how they build it and how they structure it, then that might be of benefit to you.
Thank you so much. No, this is extremely helpful. I have one last question, and we talked a little bit kind of about your plans with the fund, but I'm curious overall, what excites you for 2023? Do you think you'll be able to balance all your priorities, or is there a chance that the startup that you're joining will kind of blow up and this will be your main focus? What would be more exciting for you?
I think what excites me about 2023 is just the degree of unknowns that are all exciting. it's associated with all these things that are all exciting. So um, I'm doing my first ever value proposition based startup, which is quite interesting. So normally all my startups have been physical products that solve, very definite needs. So the startup I'm doing now is a functional mushroom one, where the dose is delivered through in a reasonably novel way, and it's very blue ocean, hopefully, to the red ocean of current functional mushrooms. So it's not a powder, it's not a gel, it's not a chewable, it's not, you don't make tea out of it. And that for me is it's scary, because it's not solving a problem that I can go out and interrogate necessarily, and so it's entirely based on value proposition. So that excites me. But also, I think what excites me is both what BDF are doing, and how we should grow over the next 12 months, and also what Amuti's doing, the company out of Falmouth. I mean, that's got the potential of being, could quite easily be a unicorn. And both are exciting. So we'll see which one dominates my time over the next 12 months.
Thank you so much for speaking with me and sharing your insights. Those affordables and inflection point, I think they stuck in me. So I'll need to do more research on that. But thank you so much.
Thanks, Igor.